For 60 years, the most famous burial in history was a lie. In a cave in northern Iraq, a Neanderthal was found surrounded by pollen. Proof, scientists said, that flowers had been laid on the grave. It was a beautiful idea. Proof of mourning. Proof that even Neanderthals, beings we had long dismissed as brutes, had stood at the edge of a grave and placed something gentle beside the dead. The story was taught in textbooks. It appeared in documentaries. It shaped how an entire generation understood what it means to grieve. In 2023, a team led by paleoecologist Chris Hunt proved the pollen came from bees, solitary bees that had burrowed into the cave floor, leaving behind the pollen they had collected. The flowers were never there. 60 years of a beautiful story, undone by insects. But here is the thing. The burial was still real. The body had been placed in a shallow depression in the cave floor, deliberately, carefully. The Neanderthals didn't need flowers to care. And the truth, the actual truth about why humans started burying their dead, is more interesting than any myth. Strip away the stories. What do we actually know? In a cave near Nazareth, in what is now northern Israel, archaeologists found the remains of 15 people, Homo sapiens, around 100,000 years old. Several of them had been buried with lumps of red ochre, 71 pieces in total, a pigment the color of blood with no practical use in a grave. One burial stood out. A child, roughly 12 or 13 years old. On their chest, touching the palms of their hands, someone had placed the antlers of a fallow deer. Heavy, awkward to carry, not food, not a tool. There is no pragmatic reason to place antlers on a dead child's chest. 20 miles southwest, at a second cave on Mount Carmel, 10 more burials from the same era. One man was found with the jawbone of a wild boar cradled in his arms, not dropped, cradled, as if it were something he needed to carry with him. These are the oldest undisputed intentional burials on Earth, not the flowers in a rock, not a beautiful myth, a deer antler on a child's chest, a boar jaw in a man's arms. The evidence is stranger than the stories and far more specific, and it wasn't only happening in the Levant. 78,000 years ago, on the coast of what is now Kenya, a child of no more than 3 was placed on their right side in a shallow pit inside a cave called Panga Saidi. Their knees were drawn up as if they were sleeping. Their head rested on something soft, a pillow made of material that would decay over the millennia, leaving only a void visible to CT scanners 78,000 years later. The upper body had been wrapped, a shroud for a child who would never wake up. No ochre was found at Panga Saidi, no antlers, no jaw, just a pillow, a shroud, and a body placed with care. The oldest known burial of a Homo sapiens in Africa, and it was for a child. So burial is old, at least 100,000 years, possibly older. In South Africa, in a cave system called Rising Star, something far more unsettling has been found. 30 meters underground, in chambers so narrow that only small-bodied researchers can squeeze through, lie the remains of at least 15 individuals of a species called Homo naledi. Their brains were roughly a third the size of ours. They lived around 300,000 years ago, and according to a team led by Lee Berger, they buried their dead. The bodies were found in fetal positions, placed in pits, in a part of the cave no one lived in. There is no evidence of habitation in those deep chambers, only death. Someone carried these bodies through the dark, through passages barely wide enough to crawl through, to a place of the dead. Not everyone agrees. The claim is contested. Several prominent scholars argue the evidence doesn't prove intentional burial, that the positioning could be natural, that the geology might explain it, that a brain that small simply cannot support the kind of thinking burial requires. The debate is unresolved. It may be for years. But the question it raises is worth sitting with. The objection is simple. A brain that small cannot think symbolically. But the evidence asks something harder. What if empathy doesn't require the brain size we assumed? What if the impulse to carry your dead into the dark, To refuse to leave them where they fell is older and simpler than the theories we built to explain it. Whether or not Homo naledi buried their dead, the deeper question remains, what does burial actually tell us about the mind that does it? Consider what it takes. To bury someone, you have to understand that they are dead, that they will not return. You have to decide that this matters. You have to imagine a state of affairs beyond the present moment, a future in which the dead person continues somehow to exist. And then you have to act on that imagined future, dig a hole, place the body, add something that serves no survival purpose, an antler, a jaw, a handful of red pigment. Every animal on Earth encounters death. Elephants stand near their dead. Chimpanzees carry dead infants for days. But no other species digs a hole, positions a body, adds objects, and walks away. Grief may be biological. Burial is a decision, and it is a decision that requires imagining something that isn't there. That is abstract thought, and burial may be its oldest surviving evidence. 34,000 years ago, on the outskirts of what is now Vladimir, Russia, 200 kilometers east of Moscow, two children were buried head-to-head in a long, slender grave. One was roughly 10, the other about 12. Their teeth show repeated periods of extreme stress. The younger boy's thigh bones were bowed and short. These were not healthy children. They were not hunters. They were not providers. And yet, someone covered their bodies in more than 13,000 beads carved from mammoth ivory. Each bead was roughly the size of a small coin. Each took about 45 minutes to carve. The total labor for the beads alone exceeded 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours for two children who would never open their eyes. Beside the bodies lay 16 spears made from straightened mammoth tusks, a feat of engineering that required soaking the ivory, heating it, and slowly forcing it into shape. 300 pierced fox teeth were arranged around them. Carved ivory animals, deer antlers, red ochre covered everything. In a nearby grave, a 40-year-old man, able-bodied, physically strong, presumably a contributor to the group, had been buried with far less. 3,000 beads, a few armbands, a stone pendant. The disabled children got more. Whatever burial means, it is not about what the dead did. It is about what the living believe. These children contributed nothing to the group's survival. Their bones tell us they could barely walk, and yet someone, probably many people over many months, sat and carved 13,000 beads for them. That is not pragmatism. That is not hygiene. That is not fear of scavengers. That is meaning. And it may be the most human thing in the entire archaeological record. The flower burial was never real, but what it tried to explain, the impulse to stand at the edge of death and do something, mark something, leave something behind. That impulse is real. It is at least 100,000 years old. It may be 300,000. Every grave you have ever visited, every headstone, every handful of earth dropped into a hole. It is the same gesture as a deer antler placed on a child's chest in a cave near Nazareth 100,000 years ago. The first person who dug a hole and placed a body inside it was doing something no other species has ever done. They were imagining a future they could not see and deciding the dead belonged in it. The truth didn't need flowers. It never did. Until next time, keep wondering. If you want to watch how ancient humans started agriculture, click the video coming on your screen. Want to understand other concepts of ancient humans? Do let us know in the comments section, and don't miss to press that like and subscribe button.